where you actually start as far as looking at the availability is your overseas segment or your really big segment, because that's the most crucial segment and that's the most difficult one to nail down. So you're going to first find availability for, what's a good example? Like, let's say we're going from London to New York to San Francisco. You're going to start by figuring out that London to New York segment first. And then after that, you're going to move into the leg planning, which would be your New York to San Francisco.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Abroaders Travel Podcast, your weekly meetup with thousands of entrepreneurs, hustlers, creators, nomads, ninjas, wanderers, and world changers, all seeking to build the skills and connections to live a life without borders. If you want to learn more about what we do or download our entire podcast archive, check out the website, abroaders.com.
Happy Wednesday morning and welcome to another episode of the Abroaders Travel Podcast. I'm AJ, here with Erik. And today we're going to be talking about how to find availability. So you can find show notes for today's episode, abroaders.com/search. How's it going, man? How's Bahia treating you?
Brazil, Bahia is awesome. I'm really excited about this episode today. I think we've been kind of overdue for a little bit more advanced search episode. We haven't really talked too much about how to get the award seats. We've kind of focused a lot on earning points lately, so I think this is going to be a pretty good episode for those of you who are out there and already have some points and are looking for a great trip and want to redeem them for an awesome adventure. So I'm excited to jump into it.
Cool, man. Tell me a little bit about Salvador. I heard a couple of rumors. So first of all, you claimed that there's actually good food in town, which I'm hard pressed to believe. However, you are a believable man. And then a water shortage? You said something about a possible water shortage going on?
Yeah, wow, man, one thing after another here. So far in my time in Salvador, not to scare anybody off, but we had a police strike last year where the police stopped working, and that ended up getting a little bit ugly. Not many people were leaving their homes, and went on for a couple of days. Weathered that storm. They've lately had a couple of bus strikes that have happened where the whole transportation system in the city just shuts down because they're having this fight. In the meantime, there have been sort of a slew of natural disasters. There was a couple of big floods where there were just parking garages that are underground were filling up and the draining system wasn't working. And so I've just been on my toes a little bit lately here. And recently I heard that there is a possible water shortage and that there may be some parts of the city that are without water. So I've been filling up a lot of water bottles in the fridge. I got about 15 liters of cold water sitting there on hold for me in case it gets ugly. But and then with the food, I think that the key is the fairs. There's a couple of weekend fairs that they put out where they just have a whole bunch of people with tents and they're out just creating their own little culinary masterpieces. And the only real drawback to these food fairs is that you have to buy these damn tickets to actually be able to buy the food. So you can't, like in many bars, in the same way as you can't go up and buy a drink with money, you have to go buy a ticket and then buy the drink. It's it's the same damn system with the food fairs. But once you navigate through all that, I had some really high quality food. I had some Middle Eastern style stuff, some falafels, and somebody actually made a real hamburger with real ground beef, and so it's been a really stellar week for me so far as food goes.
Oh, cool, man. I was actually thinking about your old man this past weekend. There's the Grand Prix in Detroit on Belle Isle, and I actually had tickets to it, but the weather was just horrendous, so I opted not to march on down the river to the venue. But it was pretty cool, man. A lot of action in the city. It was, a little bit annoying. I was out Saturday night, and there was a Taylor Swift concert. So for anyone that's a huge Taylor Swift fan, I apologize for what I'm about to say, but there's just some annoyingness going on in the city, but we all were able to rise above it and still have a good time. So that's kind of what's been going on in Detroit, a little bit different than Salvador.
I think we need to make a Formula One tour at some point. That's got to be a really international crowd that comes in. As much as Detroit, I know the auto show every year gets some pretty cool international people and a lot of companies coming into town to check things out. It's got to be one of the more sort of internationally drawn sporting events that comes to Detroit. I would imagine that's pretty cool there. And I'd love to go to some of the other famous, even more famous venues for Formula One around the world and check out a race at some point.
Yeah, man, absolutely. Speaking about international travel, so what do you have on the docket? I've been kind of trying to map out my upcoming travel, and I think I'm going to stay still in Detroit for the summer because since having a place here, I haven't actually enjoyed a Detroit summer. And as far as a Michigan year goes, summer is the time to hang out. So there's a lot of cool things going on in Detroit. So I think I'm going to stick around into August. But what do you have on the docket?
Yeah, it looks like I'm going to be back in July in Michigan, spend at least the month of July, if not a little bit of August. And then I'm headed down to Medellin, Colombia. Haven't actually booked those tickets yet, so that might be an interesting little case study. I'm hoping to use either British Airways miles to fly from the U.S. or maybe use some American points to get down to Medellin. That's in northern South America, so it's a little bit of a discount over the Brazil award ticket. So that could be kind of an interesting case study there. And then it looks like I'm headed to Budapest in early September and going to be camping out there for at least a month, maybe doing a little traveling around Eastern Europe before headed to Thailand and probably ending up in Vietnam for the end of the year.
Man, that is awesome. That is good stuff. I think I might be following you a little bit. I'm thinking sometime in September heading to Europe and then kind of maybe working my way to Asia, depending exactly on, deciding which conferences to go to and all that. But man, that's good stuff.
Yeah, one little shout out also with respect to Thailand. So I just found out that one of our buddies, Anton from Dropship Lifestyle, is going to be holding a conference in southern Thailand for the first week of October. And I definitely encourage you guys to check out Dropship Lifestyle. The website's pretty cool. And Anton has made an incredible business for himself with dropshipping, which basically means buying products and then reselling them without holding inventory. And not only is it a pretty good opportunity as far as location independence and building an online income, but also a huge opportunity to generate a lot of spend. So if it's something that interests you, you might take a look at dropshipping as an opportunity to sort of get into online internet-based businesses that give you some location freedom. And this one in particular is a double whammy for those of you that are trying to acquire points, and it really gives you a chance to increase your spend when you're basically just making purchases to buy inventory for delivering products that somebody's already bought from you. So it's very low risk. AJ buys a desk chair from me, then I buy the desk chair itself from the manufacturer, my supplier, and then ship it to AJ. And I don't actually even have to ever see the chair or touch it, but I get to spend some money on a credit card and I get to make a nice little markup.
Yeah, exactly, man. Very low risk. Lower margin, but getting your foot in the door, it's really a solid game plan if you're not sure or don't have a bunch of capital to dump into something.
All right, let's get into the content for today's episode. A lot of this is coming from our Udemy course, which is getting really close to completion. I think we're probably going to be launching this in the next 2 weeks, and so I wanted to invite you guys again to register. We've got a pre-registration page set up at abroaders.com/learn. And for those of you that do pre-register for the course, we're going to be giving away 2 things for the folks that are registering this week. Today, we're going to be talking about award research for availability. And so I've got a spreadsheet template that I think is going to help you guys a lot to just sort of keep things organized. It can kind of be a mess to try and take notes on paper or try and just plug this into some sort of digital notes. And so I spent a lot of time organizing this spreadsheet that we use for all of our award bookings that we do for clients and that AJ and I use ourselves when we're trying to find availability. So we're going to share that template with you guys. And then we're also going to be sharing a short video that's actually going to be part of the course showing some of the more advanced and intermediate route research that we do. And we're going to be talking that over today. So hopefully you guys will kind of get an idea of how it works, but definitely register for the Udemy course at abroaders.com/learn, and we'll get you those 2 bonus materials so that you can kind of have some extra tools at your disposal.
Yeah, man. All right. Well, getting into that, so like Eric said, we are going to get into some more advanced things a little bit later in the show, but we're just going to kind of walk you through it. So where we're going to start is where to find award availability in the beginning, and we're going to break it down by each of the alliances. So with the One World, the places you're going to start are with British Airways, BA.com. So with them, you've got great coverage, but it's a little bit slow to search broad dates if you've got like a wide range of dates. You've got Qantas. There's not as many partners, but it's really good for calendar searches. That's some functionality they provide that isn't as smooth on the other sites. You've got American Airlines at AA.com. You've got limited partners, but it's super easy to use. And so to sum it up, use Qantas to get a broad sense of the dates that are available, and then switch to British Airways to narrow down the availability.
Yeah, really good advice there. And British Airways is just, it's phenomenal in terms of the number of partners. So all of these, American, Qantas, and BA are all part of One World. And so they technically have the same partners for the most part, at least within the alliance. But the websites don't all search all the partners. And British Airways has the most coverage there. So they are the ones that you want to rely on when you're kind of gotten it narrowed down a little bit more and you just want to confirm that those seats are really available. At the same time, if you've got a wide open opportunity to search and you're looking at, say, for example, the entire month of July to go to Europe, on British Airways site, you have to click on every single day and wait for a page to load for every single day to see if the seats are available in July. So you're going to have to load 31 pages and wait a lot to do that search, whereas Qantas will show you a calendar of the entire month of July in one view, and you can see which dates are available. So that's sort of the trade-off there.
Yeah. Moving on to the Sky team, so we've got Delta and Air France KLM. So with Delta, it's a more improved tool than it was even 6 months ago. They've got a bunch of partners that they've added, so that's a big plus. Air France KLM, it's a decent tool, allows calendar view. You don't need points to search, which is nice, but to sum it all up, you were going to want to start with Delta and then try Air France if you're unable to find the options you need on Delta. So with Sky Team, you're going to want to start at delta.com.
Yep. And Delta, the only real problem with Delta, frankly, is just that they prioritize their own flights. And so it can be harder to find partner airlines sometimes. If Delta has a lot of routes to that destination, sometimes you're just going to see Delta flights. And frankly, especially if you're flying in business or first class, you probably don't want to be flying on a Delta operated flight. You want to look at some of those other partners. So that's just sort of the trade-off there. But overall, you're going to get a really good picture. And Delta also has a nice calendar view that they added. So that's a good place to start for that. One
thing I'd like to add about Delta, and this is not trying to jump too far forward, but you are going to want to check how many miles they're asking for against their award chart. And I don't know if it's because they added some functionality and they didn't have everything technically sound, but it was even a month or so ago, I was looking on delta.com and there's some inconsistencies with their award chart and then the price in miles that they were quoting me. So that's something just to double check. You may have to call somebody to square that out.
Yeah, and again, Delta eliminated their award chart about 3 or 4 months ago. They stopped publishing it, so you don't really know what the minimum price is that you can pay. You just sort of have to go. Now, there's definitely people that have saved the old Delta chart, so you can get an idea that way. But the number of points you're seeing, keep in mind with all of these, that these sites are resources for searching availability across the whole alliance. So in other words, when we say to use British Airways to search One World, that's not only if you have British Airways miles. The prices you see in miles and the taxes and fees are going to be only applicable if you're using British Airways miles. So the idea behind all of this is to just know which seats are available in the alliance. And in other words, so AJ's point is really important because Delta, most people are going to have Delta miles that are looking for a SkyTeam award. Those are by far the easiest to get. But if you happen to have Air France miles, the prices in terms of how many miles it costs and how many dollars in taxes and fees are totally irrelevant on the Delta site. So you're just looking for what flights are open, and then you got to call Air France to book the ticket if you've got Air France flying Blue Miles and so forth. So important to keep that part in mind.
Yeah, really, really good to make that clear. Moving on to the Star Alliance, we've got United, Al Nippon, and Aeroplan Air Canada. So with United.com, this is probably the best tool, but it will leave out some results that you can find on other websites. I've experienced this personally, especially when trying to do multi-city itineraries. It won't show you the complete itinerary, even if they actually do have all the legs. Quick tip when you are looking on United.com, at the bottom of it, you're going to want to filter and change the view. I think it tries to just show you maybe 10 results or something, that whatever the standard is, but there's a little drop down at the bottom, and have it show you the maximum amount of results. I don't know if it's 25 or 50, but that will show you some more options. ANA.com is comprehensive, but it's not exactly user-friendly. And then Aeroplan, we've got good coverage, and it tends to be easier than ANA's site. So it's kind of a good middle ground between United and ANA as far as how comprehensive it is and the ease of use. So
yeah, one of the big drawbacks too with ANA is that you have to have miles in your account to be able to search, and that can be prohibitive for some folks because they're not exactly the easiest miles to get. You can always transfer Amex points, but it kind of hurts to transfer 1,000 Amex points over just to be able to search. And we're going to actually walk you guys through how to get signed up for Award Nexus as well. And Award Nexus is generally a paid tool, but there is some free searches that are included as you sign up, and you can use that to actually search ANA's website. So that may be the best way for those of you that don't already have miles with ANA to get a look at what they have available, is to just use the Award Nexus tool.
Yeah, well, speaking of Award Nexus, moving on from the airlines websites, getting into some paid tools that do a little bit more.
Yeah, okay, so as we said, Award Nexus is a really good one, and AJ just discovered today that you can get signed up for the free tier by just creating a free account on Flyer Talk. So in other words, if you're a member of the Flyer Talk forum, which is a good thing to be a member of anyways, because there's a lot of great information there. It's free, it just takes a couple of minutes to register. And once you have your username available for Flyer Talk, you can give that to Award Nexus, and they will let you create a free account that's going to give you, I believe right now they're giving you 100 search credits. So that means basically looking at 100 different days, one flight per day, or you can kind of spread it out in different ways. But the bottom line is it's pretty much enough to do one pretty comprehensive search, and it's entirely free. The second tool to keep in mind is Expert Flyer. And this is a really nice one for getting alerts. So if you, let's say, are looking for availability on American and you don't see any Saver awards, it's just those overpriced anytime awards, Expert Flyer is a great tool because you can set alerts and it'll email you as soon as those flights open up. And so the drawback is that you have to pay $9.99 a month for unlimited searching, but there is a workaround in that you get a free trial for 5 days. So it's not going to be quite as good for those alerts, but it can be great. 5 days is plenty of time to do a comprehensive search if you're just looking for availability on the airlines that they support. And if you've got a business class ticket that you're trying to get squared away, it's definitely worth paying 1 month at $9.99, and then you can always cancel once you get your trip resolved.
Yeah, and then, ultimately, shameless plug right here, you can hire us. We leverage all these tools. We've done this a lot. So if you don't have the time, you can go to abroaders.com/award-booking, because I'm guessing most of the people with the award services at least leverage some of these tools, and we'll be able to do a decent job for you.
Very cool. All right. So let's get into some basics here and help these guys do as much of this on their own as possible. AJ, walk us through sort of the first things that you should do when you start looking for a ticket. Where do you begin with this?
The first thing would be pricing out the paid ticket, the revenue ticket. So I typically start at kayak.com because I'm a creature of habit and I just like using Kayak and looking for paid flights. So what this is going to do, it's going to do two things for you. It's going to provide a baseline and understand exactly how much money you are poised to save if you want to track that and keep some stats on stuff. And it also may show you that there's a really, really good deal on a flight that may be worth buying depending on exactly how many miles you want to have and how much traveling you're going to be doing in the future. So once you price out your ticket on wherever it is you want to go, where you actually start as far as looking at the availability is your overseas segment or your really big segment, because that's the most crucial segment and that's the most difficult one to nail down. So you're going to first find availability for, what's a good example? Like let's say we're going from London to New York to San Francisco. You're going to start by figuring out that London to New York segment first. And then after that, you're going to move into the leg planning, which would be your New York to San Francisco.
Yeah, I think a good way to think about this is you start out with what's your origin and what's your final destination. So to take it even a little bit further on like a multi-continent level, let's say you're going from New York on the East Coast out to Bangkok, Thailand. Let's say you want to go to this dropship lifestyle conference this October. So your origin's going to be New York and your destination's going to be Thailand. But with each alliance, there's going to be a bunch of different ways that you can get there. So maybe one of them's to stop in London, maybe one of them's to stop in San Francisco on the way across the Pacific. And so the key takeaway here is that when you're starting your search, you want to look for the longest distance segment. So let's take that one where you're going from New York to San Francisco and then San Francisco to Bangkok. It's much further from San Fran to Bangkok than it is from New York to San Fran on a transcon. So you want to start with that long one from San Fran to Bangkok, figure out if that's available, and then work backwards and figure out how you can actually get from New York to that international departure destination. And it works the same way in the other direction. if you're going to be flying from, New York to someplace in the Middle East, let's say Doha on American Airlines, and then connecting onward to Bangkok, I'm not actually sure which one of those is the longer. That might be a toss-up example. But the key thing is that most of the time, these itineraries are a combination of some very short positioning flights with some super long ones. And so you always want to start with those long ones first. Make sure those are available. And the short ones are not only easier to work out, but also less important if you're looking at business and first class. The long haul is the only one you care about. You could care less if you're in business class for an hour and a half flight, but on a 14-hour flight across the Pacific, that's going to make a big difference in terms of the value you're getting from your miles.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And then the final thing, as far as talking basic research strategies, is just double check the award chart and taxes and fees once you're ready to book. So make sure that there's consistencies with how many miles you're supposed to pay, and also double check and make sure that the taxes and fees are in check.
I mean, if you don't want those surprises, man. You don't want to find out that it's going to be $800 on top of your miles because you picked the wrong airline with big taxes and fees.
Yeah, I mean, if you play your cards right and you plan things properly, or if you've been listening to the show, I mean, decent rule of thumb that a one-way international flight should be $100 or less, sometimes as low as $5, but depending on the airline and where you're flying, it can be in the $80, $90 range. But yeah, make sure you're avoiding those nasty $500 to $800 fuel surcharges because you booked on the wrong airline.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the somewhat more advanced strategies. And I guess really where I want to take this is what happens when it's not that easy. I mean, it's great if you're trying to take care of that flight to Bangkok and you happen to find that there's a direct flight from San Fran to Bangkok, and then you find that you can get from New York to San Francisco by stopping in LA and then making that short connection. But that doesn't always happen, and especially if you're looking at business or first class itineraries, or you're looking at high season for a particular destination. I know, right now getting to Europe for the summer is pretty tricky. There's very limited space. And so when it doesn't work out the first time, there's a couple of different things that you can do. So number one is to expand your routing logic a little bit. And what I mean by that is that you may need to make 3 or 4 stops in each direction to actually get there. And so the same type of thing applies where if you're looking at that same itinerary and San Francisco to Bangkok isn't there, you should also be looking at San Francisco to Hong Kong, San Francisco to Seoul, Korea, then LA to Hong Kong, LA to Seoul, Chicago to Hong Kong. So start looking at all those major hubs and just find one of those super long segments. And by the way, I mean, Chicago to Hong Kong is like a 15-hour flight. So that's the one that you care about being in business class. And find that first and then figure out all the details. You're going to be able to figure out how to get from New York to Chicago or to get from Hong Kong or Seoul to Bangkok. That part's much easier. So expand your routing logic, consider taking more stops, and from that point, then once you've really locked in the couple of long haul availability options, then you can put the other pieces in place. And the other thing to consider is you want to make your dates as flexible as possible. If you've got an extra week of departure runway where you can leave up to a week earlier or up to a week later, you're giving yourself a much better chance of making that work.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's say this, man. Let's say worst case scenario, there's just nothing straightforward. You can do things like combining different currencies. Now, that kind of creates some booby traps that you need to be aware of as far as matching together different currencies on what would have been one flight had you bought a flight the traditional way. So what would be the main things you would tell people to take into consideration if, let's say, you had to combine currencies heading from the U.S. to Bangkok?
Okay, yeah, so that's a really good thing to get into, and this is another reason why you want to be well diversified, because if you have more than one type of points, especially if you have points in multiple alliances, you suddenly have a huge new set of options. If you were just looking at American Airlines miles and you just had one world, you're going to have a totally different set of routes and options available if you're able to use a different currency as well, like Star Alliance miles if you've got some United points. But let's run it back just a little bit. If you can't find an itinerary in a straightforward way, there's basically 3 things that you can do. The first thing is, like I said, you can expand your dates, or you can change your actual travel plans and travel somewhere else. That's usually not very attractive. The second thing is you can continue to search and wait for something to show up. So you just keep looking, you check in. If you're not traveling in the next few weeks, that might be a good strategy as well. But
or even leverage, or even just leverage one of those alerts on availability that you set if you're leveraging the tools we talked about.
Yep. And Award Nexus and also Expert Flyer are both pretty good at letting you sort of set and forget those alerts and get an email every day with what's available. But what AJ's talking about is what do you do when you've got almost all of it? So let's say you actually did get that Chicago to Hong Kong and you found a nice American flight that got you from New York to Chicago. So now you've gotten all the way from New York City to Hong Kong and you only have like a 3-hour flight or a 2-hour flight to get to Bangkok. That's pretty damn easy. You don't want to give up that great availability that might be gone tomorrow. And so that's a scenario where you may want to book this ticket and then use a different currency, use another airline's currency that's a different alliance, or you buy a ticket, especially with a flight within Asia. I can bet that you're going to find something on AirAsia for under $200 that's going to get you that one-way ticket that you need to complete your itinerary and get all the way to Bangkok. So AJ, why don't we refocus this and talk about kind of the potential problems that you could run into if you are combining. Let's say, it actually doesn't matter. So if you're combining two different types of award and you've got two separate record locators, say one with American Airlines and one with British Airways, or you've got a paid ticket and an award ticket, what do you got to do to make sure that, you've got a nice trip that's not going to get screwed up by a delay?
Well, I mean, that's one thing is your second flight that you get into, they don't give a damn that you're on another airline that may have botched something up. That's really not their problem. Another thing that comes to mind is if you're checking bags, that can be an additional wrinkle with that.
Really good point.
I mean, you're going to have to go out, you're going to have to get your checked bag, then you have to go back and you're going to have to check it in. So, I mean, you're going to want to give yourself plenty of wiggle room. I think that's probably the most general, just key takeaway is give yourself a nice buffer where if there is a flight that's delayed, or if you are adamant or you need to check a bag that you've got time. I mean, what else, man? Obviously, you want to keep tabs on all of your flight info, record locators, ticket numbers, because that's the quickest way to get help and an answer if you need to call up an agent or speak with somebody at the airport.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest key is to plan in longer layovers. I when I'm combining itineraries, I generally don't do it for less than 3 hours. Just count on that you're going to be in that airport, and it only matters where the two itineraries connect. So let's say you're flying into Hong Kong on a award ticket, and then you've got an AirAsia flight from Hong Kong to Bangkok that you bought for $150. You want to make sure that you've got at least 3 hours in Hong Kong in case you show up late, so you can still catch that AirAsia flight, because AirAsia is not going to care if you're late on your other unrelated itinerary. So besides building in that buffer, though, the only thing you really need to do is just keep track of your record locators, and I would make a note of the phone numbers that you've got to call. So if you booked that flight to Hong Kong with American miles, know the American Advantage desk so that you can talk to the award ticket people at American. Know the customer service number for the airline that operates your flight, so that may be Cathay Pacific in this case, and know the record locator for your Cathay Pacific flight, which is going to be different than the American. So American Airlines, they book your flight with miles, they're going to give you a 6-character record locator, and that makes it possible for American to pull up your reservation. But if you end up on the phone with Cathay Pacific, they're not going to have a clue what to do with your American record locator. So you got to ask the American Airlines people to give you the Cathay Pacific locator. And they usually don't do it by volunteering, because they think it's just going to confuse people. But get that other record locator, write it down, and put it with the phone number for the airline that you're going to be flying. Those are the two big things that you can do to protect yourself, so that if something goes wrong, you've got a way to call or get in contact with somebody at the airport that can help you find an alternative flight to get you to your destination.
Yeah. One final note on that short paid flight within Asia in this example that you might be taking is typically when you do a search and you buy the cheapest flight, that is typically non-refundable. So that's another reason to give yourself more room. I know that's in the flights I took, the paid flights in Brazil, like TAM has a really funky pricing structure. They had like 5 price points for economy class. And the first one was like non-refundable. You're completely screwed if anything happens. The next one, you get some money back. So just keep in mind when you're buying the cheapest ticket, it's probably not going to be refundable.
Well, and one other really important thing is the airline might not refund that to you, but guess who is your best friend when something gets screwed up and your flight gets delayed? That's going to be the credit card that you use to purchase that flight. So both the credit card that you paid the taxes and fees on for the award ticket and the credit card that you paid the paid itinerary, both of those, and it even helps more if it's the same card, but both of those are going to give you trip interruption, cancellation, and delay assurance. So you've got, sort of that fallback. It's still going to be a cost you're going to have to eat right at the beginning, but you do usually have recourse where you can file a claim with the credit card insurance company, and they're going to give you a reimbursement if the airline's delay caused you to miss your flight. So that's another thing that's really worth looking into if you do end up in one of those situations.
Yeah, that's also a really good point. Well, let's move this on to the most fun stuff, the most luxurious things. That's business and first class, and we've got this as a kind of a separate category because there's additional nuances to booking a business or a first class flight that it's more important than being in business class on your flight or being in first class on your flight because there's such a wide variety in what's called the hard products that are provided. Do you want to take a deeper dive into that?
Yeah, so just to define to start, hard product is sort of the physical part of your experience generally. So the most common part of that is your seat itself on a business or first class flight. It also includes the aircraft, but the part of the aircraft that you experience the most is going to be your seat. And so you want to pay attention to what type of seating they have installed in your class of service. And so a lot of airlines are in the process, sort of in a constant perpetual process of upgrading their different services on their aircraft. And so there might be a scenario, and there certainly are with some of the best airlines right now, where they have some aircraft that still have their very old business class and some aircraft that have brand spanking new, amazing, nice business class. And so you want to know which flight that is. And the best resource for that is seatguru.com. That's GURU. And they're going to be able to tell you what aircraft is going to be operating your flight. Now, it's not 100% because the airlines can always change that, but if you go to SeatGuru and you just search for the airline and the flight number on the day of travel, they're going to give you a seat map, and not only will they give you a clear idea of what the recline is going to be, kind of what the orientation is, but also there's notes like if this particular seat is like right in front of the bathroom, and people have had issues with smell or God knows what. There's
I've seen other ones too. Even you only have half a window. The seat's not aligned fully in front of windows, so you don't actually have a window. You have half of a window.
Talk about first world problems, man.
Yeah.
Oh, my caviar was fucking late, and I just had a half a window. I couldn't even look outside from my fully reclining bed. All right, well, hey, worth if you're going to be burning all those miles, we want you to have 100% of the experience, but just don't tell your friends about how upset you were about the window positioning.
Yeah. Well, here's another thing too to take into consideration, depending on your itinerary or how much you value a nice lounge, is each business and first class flight will most likely have a different lounge experience for you. So, one that's top of mind, I haven't even been there, but Eric, you have, is the Cathay first class lounge in Hong Kong. Like that's pretty cool, no?
Yeah, that's unbelievable, and I absolutely, like, if given the opportunity to fly to Asia, and I would definitely pay the premium to fly in first class versus business to have that Cathay experience again. And their lounge in Hong Kong is one of the best in the world. So you certainly want to try and set up your itinerary so that you're routing through one of the major hubs, and check out some websites that have reviews of lounges. I think 1 Mile at a Time trip reports are especially good at this. They really give you a nice holistic view of what the experience is going to be. So that's something to keep in mind. And I want to kind of try and wrap this up because we're going pretty long for this episode. So to recap the important things that you need to manage with a business in first class, you want to look at your routing, you want to look at where you're going to be stopping, and which lounges potentially you're going to have for long layovers. You want to look at the hard product, check the seat with Seat Guru, and you want to keep an eye on all of those things if your flights change, and especially if there's one of those more subtle things where the aircraft changes. You might not actually change the schedule, the departure, the arrival, the airports you transition might all be the same, but they might swap in a really really old plane for a nice new one. And so you want to be aware of that, and you should use those record locators that you wrote down because you paid close attention on the show today, and double check 2 weeks out and then again 48 hours before departure. And keep in mind that any schedule change of more than 15 minutes usually entitles you to cancel and redo your entire itinerary without paying that penalty. Now, you'd like to avoid that, but if push comes to shove, or if you actually have to cancel your trip, it's good to know that the airline making changes can exempt you from that fee. And just keep an eye on that. Take a look at the aircraft and make sure you write that down in the spreadsheet that you're going to download from our Udemy pre-registration. And once you've got that information, it's going to make it a lot easier for you to keep tabs on your itinerary and make sure that that quality of experience, the rug doesn't get pulled out from under you.
Yeah, and I'd say the one more little thing to just keep note of with all this once you book your flight is be aware of the airline's rules on changing if you do need to change your flight, because all programs are not created equally. Some are going to cost you more than others. Some will let you do more than others. What else do you have to kind of wrap up all of this on kind of the pre-booking checklist to go?
Yeah, well, I think that's a really good one. I totally forgot about bringing that up, but yeah, the ability to change flights. One aspect of it is the fee, right? So you don't want to pay a $75 or sometimes even $150 change fee. But the other piece is it's even worse if you can't change your itinerary, even when you do pay a fee. Some airlines won't let you change after departure. So if you've taken your first flight, you could be locked into the whole itinerary, and the only way you'd be able to change it is by essentially canceling it and just eating that loss of miles. And those situations are ones where if the airline makes a small change, you might get bailed out. So pay very close attention to that. But yeah, I think the wrap up here is to just make sure that you look carefully when you're making that booking. Pick the nicest routes. It's going to be a trade-off, sort of a give and take between the routing. It's maybe not worth traveling an extra 10 hours to go through Tokyo just to have, a really nice business class product on a particular aircraft that you like. It might be better to take that direct flight from JFK straight to Hong Kong. It's really something you got to kind of push back and forth and decide which way makes the most sense for you. But if you take a look at the core components, which are going to be your routing, the airline that is operating the flight, and the hard product that they have on that aircraft that's operating that route, start with those three things. Look for the long overseas segment, so the Trans-Pacific or the Transatlantic first, then fill in the gaps and get the rest of your itinerary put together. And if you get stuck, get a hold of us. We'd be happy to help you out.
Sounds good, man. Well, that is all we've got today. And do not forget, anyone that is interested in those free giveaways Erik mentioned earlier, or pre-registering for our Udemy course, you can do that at abroaders.com/learn. And like he said, within the next couple weeks, we should be releasing this. Really excited. It's going to be a pretty powerful. It's going to be a mega travel hacking resource. We put a lot of time into this, and really excited to get back to teaching. The service is fun, but it's going to be fun to teach people as well.
Yeah, all you do-it-yourselfers, definitely get on that, because there will be offers for the pre-registration list that aren't going to be part of the public Udemy course. Right now we're looking at including some consultation time with AJ or I, or with another member of our team, so that you can actually get some help specific to your situation. And we're definitely not going to be including that with the regular Udemy course. So it doesn't cost anything to register. We just want to get a list of people that are excited about this and that want to be the first to try it out, and we will sweeten the deal for you for sure. So hop over there if you have interest in learning this yourself.
Yep, that's abroaders.com/learn. And show notes for today's show will be at abroaders.com/search. And this week's international jam is from Scandinavia, a man that goes by, he goes by Top Gun. His real name is Oliver Gammelgaard. That's a tongue twister for you. The song is Veninder. It's by Top Gun. I cannot promise you what this guy talks about in the song. It may be explicit, funny, sad, no idea, but it's a smooth track, so check it out. Veninder by Top Gun.
All right, thanks a lot, guys. We'll see you next week. Hey, brothers, don't be shy. Hop over to the website and join our email list for exclusive travel hacking content. If you like what we're up to, the best way you can support the show is by leaving us a 5-star review on iTunes. Lastly, we would love to hear from you, so send your show feedback to Erik or AJ at abroaders.com. We will see you next week.